I mean, he said, I'm 100% a cannibal. I'm freaking out.
It was all he wanted to ever talk about.
A new documentary is being released that details claims of sexual sadism and other bondage fantasies involving actor Armie Hammer. This after he was already investigated by the LAPD for sexual assault allegations. So, is it all true, and what's behind it? I'm Angenette Levy, and welcome to this latest edition of Law and Crime Sidebar podcast. Armie Hammer has basically been out of Hollywood for some time now after these allegations of S&M and things like that came to light from women he had been involved with. And so there's this new documentary coming out on Discovery Plus where some of these women who said they were sexual partners with Armie Hammer detail their experiences with him. They have audio recordings that came from him, and they detail what they went through with him. And also, a family member of Armie Hammer's is taking part in this. So, joining us to talk about this today is Jonathan Handel. He's an entertainment attorney out in Los Angeles. Jonathan, welcome back to Sidebar. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Angenette.
Jonathan, when you first saw this trailer, and it's a trailer for this documentary that's going to be on Discovery Plus, what came to mind?
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge several things. First of all, we are at the intersection of several third rails here. One of them is the distinction between the court of public opinion and the court of law. And it's important to acknowledge that Hammer has not been charged with a crime, let alone been convicted of a crime. We don't know what the LADA is going to do, if anything, with the results of an earlier investigation. That's extremely important. Secondly, we are at a very difficult place when we talk about S&M, particularly heterosexual S&M involving women as the submissive partners. That is difficult because on the one hand, it seems very, to many people, that kind of those kinds of fantasies, those kinds of conduct seem very exploitative and are perceived by many people as being part and parcel of a long history of non-consensual violence against women in sexual contexts, of marital rape, of men forcing women or pressing women to accept their definition of what sexual conduct should be, all of those kinds of things. But the flip side is that consensual S&M, whether it's a woman as a submissive partner, the dominant partner, whether it's gay, whether it's lesbian, is legal and is not only a fantasy for a large number of people, but also conduct that a large number of people actually engage in and get pleasure from. Now, we're not here to sit in judgment about, well, are they deluded? Should they be, allowing themselves to be treated as in one way or another? What we are seeing here is a very visceral reaction to allegations that Hammer was had these fantasies, and if the text messages that we've been supplied, that we've seen, and some of the voice recordings are accurate, it sounds like he does have fantasies of being, sexually dominant with women, and B, the allegations are that at least some of this was non-consensual. He denies those allegations. His representative, his lawyer, Andrew Brettler, has stated to you and to the press generally, right, as of last year, that all of Hammer's relationships with these women who describe themselves as victims were in fact consensual. So it's a very explosive mixture.
Yeah, and let's talk about that for a minute because there is a woman in this documentary. She is not the woman who the LAPD the allegations made against Armie Hammer were made by this woman, Effie Angelova. And LAPD investigated those claims. And back in 2021, as you mentioned, it was March of 2021, actually, I reached out to Andrew Brettler, who was representing Armie Hammer at the time. And I said, what's going on with this? What's your statement on this? Do you have a response? Would you do an interview? And he sent me a statement that he had sent to other media saying, basically, here's Instagram chat from Effie Angelova, in which she said something like, quote, "I'm not saying he raped me. I did not say anywhere it was not consensual." They also provided us with text messages purportedly from Effie Angelova to Armie Hammer, in which she was using some pretty vulgar language and asking for sex. And Andrew Butler said these were authentic texts. And he said that all of the sexual interactions that Armie Hammer has ever had were were consensual, rather. And he said at the time as well, it was never Mr. Hammer's intention to embarrass or expose Miss Angelova's fetishes or kinky sexual desires, but she has now escalated this matter to another level by hiring a civil lawyer to host a public press conference. With the truth on his side, Mr. Hammer welcomes the opportunity to set the record straight. So that was Andrew Bretler to me back in March of 2021. Fast forward to December of 2021, the LAPD handed over its investigation to the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. At the time, TMZ reported that a law enforcement source told them charges were unlikely and that the case was not very strong. I've reached out to the LA County DA's office to ask them, have you indeed said you're not going to charge Armie Hammer in this case? So far, no response. So with that said, we've got this documentary coming out now on Discovery Plus, basically with all of these, women and a family member of Armie Hammer's saying, all these terrible things, that they endured at his hands. But he's saying, at least back in March of 2021, it was all consensual. So what do you do with that?
Well, it's very tough. And to add one detail, before the interview, you read me a little bit of the texts that are allegedly from Effie to Armie, and they weren't simply, vulgar is one way of characterizing them, but what you read me was not only sexually explicit, but she was requesting some in those texts, if they are texts from her, she was requesting S&M behavior. She was requesting that she be an S&M submissive to Armie. So if that is accurate, then if that behavior actually happened and there was no revocation of consent beforehand, or during it, hey, Armie, this is going too far, we have a safe word read, or whatever, stop, then it's consensual adult behavior. If what we're hearing is accurate, it is important to say, as you said, that we've got a promotion here for a documentary that's coming out in about 3 weeks on Discovery Plus, and you wouldn't expect the documentary promotion to be, we have a documentary and we're going to show you how ambiguous everything is. It's very hard to run a promotion of that sort and to do a show of that sort. It's also important to remember, documentaries come in different flavors. Some of them are balanced journalistically, others are not. And there isn't some are more advocacy in one direction or another, sometimes in directions that we feel are right. Other times in directions that people might feel are tendentious or not correct. So it's important to remember that when we're talking about a documentary, we're not talking necessarily about journalism per se and about a balanced and fair approach. And so, is Armie Hammer getting an unwarranted slap in the face because of this? It's very hard to know, and we may never know with all the potentially disputed material that's out there.
Whether all of these encounters were consensual or not, and we can't say because you and I, we weren't there. But just the allegations of this becoming public have obviously destroyed his career. The last I saw, he was in the Cayman Islands working some job. So it makes you wonder.
Selling timeshares in the Cayman Islands.
Yes, selling timeshares in the Cayman Islands. So he goes from being an actor to allegations coming out of him saying, I'm 100% a cannibal and things of that nature. And he's done. Like I don't think there's any way back for him.
Well, there probably isn't, and it's again, we have to remember for many people, the things that Armie Hammer is purported to have, the fantasies that he's purported to have expressed, and some of which pretty clearly did express, it seems, in the audio, assuming again that that is him, uh, are absolutely a nightmare. But for some people, they are an absolute dream and fantasy. And it's hard for people, that aren't into S&M to, to see that and to give that space. And certainly when those feelings are, the feelings about that are combined with the sort of media attention this has gotten, it is very hard to see how certainly not in the near and medium term, Armie Hammer comes back. It's very difficult to see that.
Yeah, very much so. And I want to say that, in the past, he has called the allegations BS, but he said, the whole word. And obviously, Andrew Brettler has said this was all consensual. This documentary, I should say, House of Hammer, his aunt, apparently, Casey Hammer, is also in this, talking about the family and alleged abuse in the family. Do you see anything coming of this? Because we saw that the LAPD already investigated one claim. Now you've got this documentary coming out with other women saying things, and claiming that, he tied them up and this, that, and the other. Does the LAPD look into this, do you think, after the documentary airs?
Well, that depends on what's on the documentary, really. I mean, what we've seen from the trailer, there is there's a certain amount of guilt by association. The family stuff. I mean, Casey, I understand, alleges that she was sexually molested by her father when she was a girl, when she was a child, which does not in any way reflect on her nephew. It's a terrible thing if true, obviously, that for anyone to be molested by anyone, let alone by a parent. But what does that have to do with Armie? To be perfectly honest, and creating a sort of a succession narrative here that there was reference in one of the press reports that Armie's great great grandfather, who was the father of Armand Hammer being the oil baron who made the money for the family, but that the oil baron's father was apparently charged with, I think, was charged with murder for an abortion that ended in the death of the woman or something of that. So you're like, are the sins of the great great grandparents visited on the celebrity great great grandson? So I don't know. If there are specific allegations in the documentary that are new and that are potentially criminal, then I would expect that the council would bring that to the authorities, whether the LAPD or the district attorney, in trying to make a charging decision. If there aren't specific actionable items, the police and DAs are wary of being brought into whether it's a consensual situation or whether it's just like, look, this guy is the heir to a family that's, had some criminal or cruddy people in it, malfeasant people in it. Well, that's not, a crime. And I guess, in talking and thinking about the sexual stuff, it is worth mentioning that, not only is Armie Hammer obviously a man, a cisgender man, which evokes a power differential with respect to women, but he is also a very wealthy man and a good-looking or a good-looking guy, which is a form of sexual currency that also evokes power. So it's all of these things make any rational analysis of this ultimately very difficult because people it's very hard to untangle all these elements and then say, how do you feel about it and how should other people feel about it? And what if, some people want some of this consensually? Is it true consent? Is it false consent? Is it false consciousness? It gets very hard.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what comes after the documentary airs, what's in it, and whether it leads to anything else, and if Armie Hammer, takes any action because of it. Because, even if even if all of this is consensual, which he maintains it is, I don't know. Does he have a claim here that people are just using this salacious S&M stuff to produce entertainment?
That's very hard because that would be a very hard claim for him to make if the allegations are not in the documentary are true, and we don't know what the documentary is going to allege or how close will come to making allegations. But truth is protected by the First Amendment, and Hammer is a public figure, and public figures have diminished ability because of the First Amendment to to push back against something that if someone who's not a public figure suddenly becomes the the subject of found footage on YouTube. You secretly do a documentary on your S&M neighbor who's not in any way, shape, or form famous. There's an invasion of privacy issue that can be very strong. If there are any sex tapes, we saw that Gawker was crushed by Hulk Hogan because they did publish truth, but the truth they published was actual sex tapes that were taken, I believe, without his knowledge, certainly not with any consent that they would be publicly distributed. And that was a fairly rare example where the media lost big. The outlet ended up being financially crushed by it. But we are assuming that there are not going to be, actual sexual tapes in this documentary. No one has claimed that there are, and so that leaves it probably on firmer ground as far as the First Amendment goes, unless there is actual falsity to it.
Sure. My only thought was, and of course, if you're a public figure, you have to prove things like actual malice and stuff like that. And obviously, it sounds like the allegations of the S&M are true. Whether or not it was consensual is the question. So it's something. It's something that I think a lot of people will watch. So Jonathan Handel, thanks as always for coming on to talk with us about these entertainment related issues. We appreciate it as always.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And that's it for this edition of Law and Crime Sidebar Podcast. It is produced by Sam Goldberg and Michael Deininger. Alyssa Fisher handles our bookings. Bobby Zoki is our YouTube manager. And Kiara Bronson handles our social media. You can find Sidebar on Apple, Spotify, Google, and wherever else you get your podcasts. And of course, you can watch it on our YouTube channel, the Law and Crime Network YouTube channel. I'm Angenette Levy, and we will see you next time.